My name is Major Jenkins. I've done a couple of presentations this weekend on the Maya and 2012 and the Maya calendar and what I've discovered in looking at the Maya material in about 25 years of research. And just as a quick nutshell, it's actually connected to what I'm going to be talking about here with the Finnish Kalevala, the ancient legends of the far north from the sort of European, Northern European context. It actually connects with what I'll be talking about here. What I discovered in my work with 2012 and the Maya calendar is that apparently the ancient Maya intended 2012 to target a rare astronomical alignment, and that is of the December solstice sun lining up with the Milky Way. And it's actually lining up with that part of the Milky Way that contains the galactic center. The nuclear bulge of the galactic center is basically visible to the naked eye if you're out there camping in August, and you can see the wider part, and there's this sort of dark rift feature that runs through there. The Maya mythologized this part of the sky in a very important way. The nuclear bulge itself was seen to be as the womb of the Great Mother deity, and this dark rift feature would be the birth canal. So when the December solstice sun shifts into alignment with this part of the sky, it gives rise to a cosmology of rebirth and renewal. And so the background features involved in that, the Milky Way and the galactic center and the dark rift, it's all features that relate to the Great Mother archetype. And the world renewal message of the ancient Maya for 2012 then is anchored to this cosmic mother principle in the sky. So, that part of my work in looking at Maya mythology is filtered out into different books and different discussions on the Maya in 2012 and so on. Around the time I was doing that research in the early 90s, I was actually living in Colorado, Louisville, Colorado, outside Boulder. I was living in a renovated garage without running water and had my little research thing going on there. I was able to pursue my research because I was living so modestly. And oddly enough, at the very same time I was doing this research into the Maya, I was very fascinated with the ancient legends of Finland, otherwise known as the Kalevala. And I was reading the Kalevala in the translation of Adolf Freiberg, and I got involved in different aspects of that, so the epic poetry. And in my work, I realized something about sort of a hidden subtext layer of the Kalevala that you had to sort of like read between the lines to get. And I'll be getting into this in my presentation. That basically points us to this archaic mother goddess culture in the far north. So, the title of my talk is A Mushroom as Big as the Sky, the Finnish Kalevala and the Sampo Connection. So, the Kalevala is a collection of ancient oral poetry that was going on in Finland for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Runo singers, a Runo is like a chapter or a song. The Runo singers were like pack peddlers traveling around the outbacks of the far north, outbacks of Finland, and going from village to village, and sort of like one of the things they would do is they would sing the songs. A lot of times this would happen in beer halls, in the late Middle Ages, and they'd sing the ancient legends about the Kalevala heroes named Vainamoinen and Ilmarinen and these different sort of like cultural hero deities. By the late 1700s, all these little fragments of the ancient oral tradition of Finland, they were floating around, different redactions and versions in different villages. And folklorists in Finland, in Helsinki, outside of Helsinki, started to wonder about this repository of ancient lore. There was little fragments of like the origin of iron story, the origin of fire. There were like healing hexes. There were like magical incantations. There were marriage ceremony sort of sequences in the poetry. And it just became fascinating And this guy here, Elias Lönnrot, he was a doctor, and in the early 1800s, he started traveling around the outbacks of Finland. It was part of his work as a doctor to go around to the different villages and do healing work with people and so on. And when he would do that, he would start collecting the stories, and he basically collected it into what has become known as the Kalevala, the epic of the Finnish people, which is this huge, it's basically like the Bible of the Finnish people. And it goes to some 50 runos, or chapters, and consists of over 25,000 lines of poetry. And it's actually very deeply connected to the shamanistic tradition, because a lot of the stories have to do with like cosmogonic themes, like the origin of the world and that kind of thing. And there's a couple of artifacts, you might say, or themes or features that are in the Kalevala that really point to this very, very old, archaic, shamanistic tradition in the far north. In fact, the Finnish people themselves are sort of not related to the Indo-European groups that came into Europe in different waves through history. They're sort of like the Basque people, in that they seem to be like the original indigenous inhabitants of a part of Europe that never got assimilated or conquered. Their language, the Finnish language itself, is a very unusual language. It seems to have more connections with languages, the Finno-Ugric, the Ugric sort of branch of language from the Central Asia. So, you know, there's something very interesting preserved in the Finnish tradition, and the Kalevala is a great doorway into this very archaic world. The guy on the right is a Finnish-American poet-translator named Eno Freiberg. He was born in Finland in 1901. He came to the United States as a boy and lived outside of Boston with his family. He was blind by age 10. And he actually went to Harvard. And he did a translation of Horace in the 1920s and won an award. And he went to the Perkins School for the Blind after that and taught there. He became a Unitarian Universalist minister for many years. And one of his unpublished manuscripts is called The Presence. And it's a manuscript that's about his period of time that he went through where he felt he was in the direct presence of God. And I happened to come into contact with Freiberg in the mid-90s. By that time, he was in his 90s. And because he's the one who produced this beautiful translation of the Kalevala, something that he started at age 78, working from Braille, to do the translation from Finnish, because he knew Finnish. Took him 10 years to complete. He completed it when he was 88. And it's just this beautiful version of the Kalevala. So I came into contact with Freiberg, and I basically became his literary executor after he died. So in the Kalevala, there's a cast of characters. These various characters from the Finnish mythology have made their way into all sorts of artistic things with music and the arts. But oddly enough, it's little known outside of the Finnish context. One of the primary culture heroes or deities in the Kalevala is Vainamoinen, the eternal sage. He's sort of the head honcho of the entire group of characters. He's almost like a Finnish Orpheus, in a sense. He's like the primordial incantator. He can just compose hexes and runos and poetry, like a bard. He's kind of like the Finnish bard, just like on the spot. And he basically, being like the Finnish Orpheus, he plays the compilation, which is like a harp that sits on your lap. And one of the more beautiful runos or chapters from the Kalevala is Runo 41, and it's called Vainamoinen's Playing. And I'll just read a short sequence from this, just to give you a sense of the rhythm in the meter and the sort of the space that's created by this poetry. Vainamoinen's Playing. Old reliable Vainamoinen, singer immortal, rubs his thumbs and limbers up his fingers, seats himself upon the joystone, takes his place upon the song rock, high up on a silver hill, there upon a golden knob. Then he took his new-made harp, and he laid it on his knees, underneath his hands, and said, "Come and hear now, all of you, who have never heard before, the joy of poetry supernal, echoing from the joyous giver." Then old Vainamoinen played, leading off with delicate chords on the pike-bone instrument, on the new-made harp of fishbone. Nimbly rose and fell his fingers as his thumb moved lightly, lightly. Now the music rose to joyance, and the joy to high rejoicing. All the music felt so real. On from song to song, high hymning, with the twanging of the pike tooth and the sounding of the fish tail, all the horsehair strings resounding, stallion hairs re-echoing. So that is a sense of the rhythm of the Kalevala meter. It's also referred to as the Hiawatha meter because Longfellow basically lifted the rhythm of the Kalevala when he composed his poem Hiawatha. Finnish mythology has made its way into a lot of different artifacts or productions that we are very familiar with. Like, for example, the British writer and mythmaker J.R.R. Tolkien was greatly influenced and inspired by the Kalevala. In fact, he drew a lot of his themes and sequences from the great Tolkien mythos, The Lord of the Rings, from Kalevala episodes. In fact, Vainamoinen is the prototype for Merlin. There's another character in the Kalevala named Kullervo. He's sort of the tragic bad boy. He gets into all kinds of trouble, and he's sort of an archetype where, he gets in trouble despite himself. Like, he's almost like a lovable character, but then he's got this weird mean streak, that comes up. So that's Kullervo. Lemminkainen is another one of the primary three Kalevala heroes, you might say. Lemminkainen is like the Arctic Don Juan. He's always gallivanting around the villages, going to the dances with the women. But he's also, in an interesting sequence, he's the resurrecting God man. And his mother basically breathes life back into him after he is killed. And so in a sense he participates in that Jesus mythos as a resurrecting deity, which one of the Finnish scholars actually traced where this might have originated from. And he didn't trace it to the Christian mythos, but he traced it back to an earlier Osiris context that would have come up to Finland through trade routes before the Christian era. Interesting stuff. The third Kalevala hero is called Ilmarinen. He's like the primordial smithy. He's like he's forging the different things. In fact, he forges this magical object called the Sampo. The Sampo is going to feature in this discussion quite a bit. Now, apart from these three sort of united Kalevala heroes, they're all sort of on the same side in a sense. They're kind of like brothers. They're sort of tribal brothers, you might say, and they all play a distinct but different role in this entire mythos. Sort of against these Kalevala heroes is this figure named Louhi. Now, she's characterized as the witch of Northland, which is Pohjola. That's the area even further north from the land of Kalevala, the land where the Kalevala heroes live. Louhi is actually from this more northern part of Finland, and she's in this contestable battle with the Kalevala heroes because she wants to steal the Sampo, this magical object. So here we can even see the map. Pohjola is to the north, and Kalevala, or Kalevala, is further south in Finland there. And here's the three Kalevala heroes. And Louhi's going, you know, she's basically like, you know, you can't have the Sampo. I have the Sampo. This is actually from Runo 42, which is called The Theft of the Sampo. And this is really, almost in a sense, this is sort of like the central core of the entire Kalevala mythos. The theft of the Sampo is really important on a couple of different levels. Why did Louhi have the Sampo? Why did she want to steal the Sampo? Why did the Kalevala heroes want the Sampo themselves? Well, we're going to get into this a little bit. There's another character named Ainu, a beautiful maiden. Now, as I mentioned, the three main Kalevala heroes are Vainamoinen, the eternal sage, Ilmarinen, the primordial smithy, and Lemminkainen, who's sort of like an Arctic Don Juan. Notice that these characters have three very distinct personality profiles. To understand who these Kalevala heroes represent, I turn to the work of Pekka Urvast, who was a Finnish mystic, often characterized as a Christian mystic, but he was also very interested in the work of Rudolf Steiner and theosophical ideas. He actually wrote a book called Kalevalan Avain, which is the key to the Kalevala, and it was originally published in Finnish in 1916. And when I got interested in the Kalevala, this was in the early 90s, so it was pre-internet, and I was able to look up that there was still a society called the Ruusuristi in Finland that was publishing Urvast's work. So I wrote to Finland, and to my surprise I got a response back, and I started correspondence, and I suggested that we translate this into English. So 10 months later, a rough manuscript arrived on my doorstep, and I started working with this doctor in Finland to edit or fine-tune what was actually sort of a rough translation. So it ended up being a labor of love going back and forth, and we were able to get this book published in 1999, completed it, and since I was already in touch with Freiberg, and he was still alive, I asked him permission to use his English translation of the Kalevala. So it's a very unique offering, this book, and I do have several copies with me. And there's also copies over at the bookstore at the Palm Center, so if you're interested, let me know. As mentioned, Freiberg was born in Finland, but he came to the United States early. He was blind since about age 10. He finished his great translation at age 88. And Urvast's insight into his traditions, of the Kalevala, I think is really, really important because it accesses this kind of archetypal level of what's going on in the story. I got so deeply engaged in this and doing this work with the Kalevala. I used to read the Kalevala at poetry open mics and stuff like that, and I started composing the poetry using that Hiawatha rhythm, the Kalevala rhythm. And I actually have a frontispiece, a little poem that they gave me permission to include in the book. It was a sort of an homage to Pekka Urvast, because I felt that in my work of trying to render this into accurate and good English, I almost felt like I was communing with Urvast's spirit at times. So I wrote this little poem. Talked with Pekka, now this editing is finished. I am tired, my duty ended. Learned the magic of old Finland, heard the chanting, talked with Pekka. Though the sentences all were backwards, flipped around and somewhat awkward, I worked together with the doctor to unkink them, lead them straightways, so that singers in our times, magic makers in my land, might grow wiser having listened to the Runo wizard's wisdom, metaphysical expressions, insights of the far north's teacher. These are almost like, sort of like, the way that this stream of ancient gnosis coming through from the ancient shamanic bards or Runo singers filtered into modern times through the work of modern poets and mystics and philosophers like Pekka Urvast and Elias Lönnrot, saving the old stories. Now, Urvast's insight is basically very, very interesting. He applied an archetypal interpretation to the Kalevala heroes, identifying how they represented three aspects of the human being. His approach was similar to Rudolf Steiner's and how depth psychologists such as C.G. Jung analyzed myths. So he was interested in the archetypal core of these three different characters. You could characterize them as avatars, or forces, perhaps, evolutionary forces, or principles in the Kalevala, where, generally speaking, Vainamoinen, Vainamoinen is like the Dios principle. He's the overarching deity of the Trinity. Lemminkainen is like the Eros principle. Remember, he's like the feeling. He's like the Arctic Don Juan, and he's also how the heart can be renewed and reborn. He went through a resurrection process in his being. And Ilmarinen, he's the primordial smithy. He's like the one who forges out the things, and so he's like the logos, or the intellect. So you have intellect, emotion, and I also, in my own thinking or working with these principles, I think of the Dios principle as like the will. So we have like a sort of a commonly understood trinity, you know, will, emotion, and intellect at work in the dynamics of these Kalevala heroes. And it's really their adventures and misadventures that document the pitfalls and the victories that we all experience on the journey to wholeness as we try to integrate these three different aspects of our being. Sound familiar? Take a moment. Now, this might seem sort of ridiculous, but these are archetypal forces, and so they have meaning. They can work in many different contexts. Of course, here's the Star Trek mythos. Kirk is Dios. He's the will. We gotta get there now. You know, that's Kirk. And McCoy is Eros. He gets emotional, he gets flustered, and he's always, you know, losing his cool, you know, he's emotional. What's that?
Damn it, Jim.
Damn it, Jim. Yeah. And Spock, of course, is Logos, or the intellect, right? Well, the connections to the Kalevala here are actually well understood. Gene Roddenberry, who created the Star Trek mythos in the early 60s, he was influenced by the science fiction milieu of the time. One of the popular science fiction writers was a Finnish-American writer named Emil Petaha, and he wrote a series of books based upon the Kalevala mythos, one of which was called The Star Mill, the Star Mill being sort of another name for the Sampo. And so it's no surprise that there was this connection that happened from the Kalevala leading into this very bankable franchise known as Star Trek, because it's using those core archetypal principles. Well, that's one of the reasons. But anyway, so the Sampo. This is where we really get into something fascinating about ancient cosmology and ancient shamanistic cosmology. The Sampo is like a magic mill that's capable of producing anything that you wish. But it's a great mysterious object. And it's something that's coveted by the Kalevala heroes as well as Loki, the witch of Northland. It's pretty well known that the Sampo is a metaphor for the starry sky centered on the pole star overhead, which in the far north is centered upon the pole star, the nail of the north. You know, at the far northern latitudes, the pole star, the north celestial pole, is very high in the sky. So the entire sky spins around it. It's like this merry-go-round, you know. The central axis, Mundi, connected to the nail of the north, comes down right from there into the earth. And this gives rise to the Tree of Life, or Yggdrasil mythos, which you also find in the Norse legends in a sort of a different inflection. And the Sampo itself is an inspiration for a great deal of art in Finland and elsewhere. It was something that was talked about quite a bit in the book Hamlet's Mill. In fact, the very title of this famous book, Hamlet's Mill, came out in 1969, written by science historians, a couple named Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Dechen. Hamlet's Mill is sort of like the Danish version of the Sampo symbol. And one of my early books, actually, was commentary on Hamlet's Mill. It was never published. In fact, about 80% of it was lost in an early computer, but I have a version of it online, a commentary on Hamlet's Mill. Basically, the Sampo is this metaphor for the starry sky centered on the pole star. You can see here, it's like the celestial dome. One of the names of the Kalevala is the ciphered cover. The ciphers are the stars. And it's like the cover, the tent canopy, that is basically the entire sky. And then you have the axis mundi, and look how beautifully this reflects not only the sky with the stars, but the Amanita mushroom. And linguistically, there are Finnish, the Finnish word for the Sampo is actually samon, which relates, and I don't have this off the top of my head, but it's very, I think it's samon is Finnish, and then soman is more of a Sanskrit word for soma. So there's even a linguistic sort of connection going on here between the Sampo and soma. Soma, of course, being the the word that Wasson has used for the Amanita muscaria and so on. And so you not only have this meaning of the Sampo, where it's the entire sky, but it's also connected to the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And of course, well, this sort of opens it up to the whole discussion of why the Sampo was so coveted, why it was so desired. And I'll just read from an article that I wrote for a newspaper many years ago. Kind of nails it right here. One of the uniquely Finnish artifacts is the Sampo, although its symbology partakes of the universal concept of the sacred tree. It is a cosmological metaphor for the stellar dome centered upon the pole star, and at the same time, a kind of magic mill capable of producing wealth. The Sampo is a model of the cosmos directly springing from the traditions of Siberian mythology, which has many features in common with Finnish myth: the cosmic axis, shamanic journeys to the pole star, the nail of the north, the sacred tree with 3, 7, or 9 levels, the shaman's tent with its central pole and starry ciphered cover. The pole star was the universal cosmic axis of these circumpolar schemes, but the Sampo is uniquely Finnish. Surviving through the archaic surges of historical migrations, relayed from generation to generation by word of mouth alone, its details transforming in the slow pass of ages, the Sampo's conceptual antecedents traveled across the Siberian tundra from Central Asia thousands of years ago. But in the Finnish legends, its true nature is shrouded. And yet myth has a way of preserving the essence of ancient knowledge. The theft of the Sampo chapter is believed by many scholars to be the oldest core of Finnish mythology. In its deepest meaning, the theft of the Sampo is about the upsetting of the celestial frame, the removal of the celestial center to another place, and the beginning of a new world age. This idea, clearly present in the theft of the Sampo story, is tantamount to saying that the pole star moves. The pole star does move. A slow wobbling of the Earth's axis in a cycle of 26,000 years is the foundation of the concept of astrological ages. Each age delineates different chapters in the development of humanity. Modern astronomy calls the phenomenon the precession of the equinoxes. The arcane astronomical fact is at the core of the ancient concept of world ages. Could this astronomical knowledge be hidden in the ancient legends of Finland? Well, I think it is. Now, for a little fun, I'll get back to this stuff. We'll be sequencing back to this. My grandma kept everything, all right? And when she passed away in 1997, I helped my mom go through my grandma's house in Wisconsin. She lived in a little town in Wisconsin. And found this box of my old drawings from when I was a kid. And this has my name on it. Apparently it's something I did. It's dated on the back March 4th of 1971. Of course, in the Midwest, March is the month where you go out and fly a kite, right? And I remember we would do that all the time. It was so fun. And March 4th was also my birthday. I was 7 years old on March 4th, 1971. Look at this. I mean, this is like personal archaeology or something like this. Because, I mean, here you got, the kids love the Amanita mushroom, right? And we see it in the Disney movies and stuff like that. But still, what I noticed about this, sort of like looking at it as an adult, is that, of course, you've got the mushroom and the 4 dots, which are almost like the 4 directions. And the kite above has the 4 in it, you know, the 4. And all of this stuff, the grass here in front, it almost looks like a kind of glyphic writing, like the language of the goddess that Maria Gimbutas talks about, right? And then, okay, here we go. Now this undulating hill is so like, well, it's very undulating, and it's like the earth goddess has those sort of contours and features that are so beautiful. And what I liked about this is that who's flying the kite? This mysterious consciousness or being or presence. You know, it's like the mushroom itself, you know, has this sort of hidden consciousness going on inside of it. Well, how does a 7-year-old kid know this stuff? I don't know. It's just it's like intuitive stuff. For those of you who are into, like Terrence McKenna was a friend of mine, and I always appreciated how, like, he responded to my letters back around 1990, you know, for an aspiring author to reach out to somebody, and they actually respond. That was a great inspiration for me, and we became friends, corresponding through the 90s. And of course, for those of you who are familiar with what Terrence and his brother Dennis did, they did this experiment at La Chorrera in Colombia that involved taking a large amount of the mushrooms, and this experiment involved breaking through to this other plane and so on. But you can read about this in True Hallucinations or The Invisible Landscape. And the day that they inaugurated their experiment, it was something that they planned together right there, and they were going to do it that night. And they took the mushrooms, and then Dennis did his thing, and this whole thing broke open, and it unfolded over like a 2 or 3 week period that Terrence writes about. The day that they inaugurated the experiment was March 4th of 1971. Don't get me started. All right, so the theft of the Sampo. I'm going to, it's really the core thing. Here we see, like, look how they portrayed Loki. Not too flattering, really. I mean, what we start to see here are like a bit of history that's been sort of integrated into the Finnish legends, where the 3 Kalevala heroes start to look like sort of Viking marauders coming in to an area that was already populated by people. You know, the Viking, and actually historically, the Norse people did come in from Sweden into Finland, and there was a culture clash that happened there. And of course, it sort of calls into question, like, as to who Loki really was. But I'm going to read from the Theft of the Sampo story. Bear in mind that this is written from the perspective of the story as told by, you know, by the Runo singers. I'm not going to read the whole thing because this could take forever, but I want to give you a sense of this core episode, the Theft of the Sampo. Vainamoinen, as the leader, and smith Ilmarinen second. Third, the wayward son of Lempi, he, the handsome man, far-minded, sailed across the clear sea surface, out upon the open ocean, to that chilly Northland village, to the dark of Pohjola, to that man-devouring region where so many humans founder. Who is going to do the rowing? First is craftsman Ilmarinen. He will be the foremost rower, oarsman at the forward oars. Second is wayward Lemminkainen, stationed at the rearward oars. Old reliable Väinämöinen is the steersman at the stern. Easily he guides the vessel, steering straight across the billows, heaving seas and white-capped waves toward the piers of Pohjola, till they reach the well-known moorings. And as soon as they arrive there, at the end of their long journey, they hauled the boat up on the shore, heaved the tarry proud one up unto the steely rollers on the copper-banded jetty. They approached the house from there, quickly entered without warning. There the mistress of Pohjola asked the unexpected strangers, "What news have you men to tell us? What new message do you bring us?" Väinämöinen answers plainly, "All our news is of the Sampo and concerns the ciphered cover. We are here to share the Sampo and to view the ciphered cover." Said the mistress of Pohjola, Loki, "There is never enough, good fellows, in one grouse for two to share, nor for three men in a squirrel. It is good to have the Sampo grinding, many ciphered cover turning, here in Pohjola's stone fortress, there inside the Copper Mountain. It is good for me, myself, to be keeper of the Sampo." Said old Väinämöinen then, "If you will not share it with us, give us just the other half, then we'll take the whole mill with us, take it all off to our vessel." Loki, mistress of Pohjola, furious at the threatening words, called together all her people, young men eager with their swords, warriors ready with their weapons to attack old Väinämöinen. But the staunch old Väinämöinen turned then to his five-stringed harp, sat down with the instrument, and began to play it softly. All the people flocked to listen, all enraptured with the music. Men delighted, women laughing, even brave men moved to tears, youngsters kneeling on the ground. Soon the folk began to tire, overcome with drowsiness. All the listeners, all the watchers, nodded drowsily and slept. Slept the young, slept the old, lulled by Väinämöinen's playing. Then the wise old Väinämöinen, knower eternal, seer immortal, put his hand into his wallet and drew out his medicine bag, took some slumber needles from it, and he salved their eyes with sleep, crossed the lashes, sewed the eyelids of the weary, drowsing people, eased them into deep, long slumber, sleeping for a good, long spell, all the clan of Pohjola, all the people of the village. Then they went to seize the Sampo and to spy the ciphered cover in dark Pohjola's stone fortress. There inside a copper mountain, well secured behind 9 locks, and an inner bolt, the 10th. Väinämöinen chanted softly at the Copper Mountain's gates, there before the great stone fortress. Soon the fortress gates were moving, and the iron hinges bulging. Then the craftsman Ilmarinen, as the second man in order, buttered the locks and greased the hinges to prevent the gates from grating and to stop the hinges creaking. Loosed the great locks with his fingers, pried the bolts up with a mattock. Now the locks turned over freely, and the heavy doors swung open. Then old Väinämöinen said, "Now you, wayward son of Lempi, my great friend, go get the Sampo, heave the ciphered cover up." So the wayward Lemminkainen, he, the handsome man, far-minded, always ready without urging, quick in action without praising, went to carry out the Sampo, heaved the ciphered cover up, and he said as he was going, boasted as he strode along, "What true manhood may be in me, manhood in the old man's son, let it now uproot the Sampo, let it lift the ciphered cover with the aid of my right foot, with the light touch of my boot heel." Then he tried to move the Sampo, tried to move it, tried to turn it, tried to hug it in his lap, struggled with it on his knees, but the Sampo would not move, nor the ciphered cover stir. It was rooted down so firmly, rooted down 9 fathoms deep. There is an ox at Kalevala, which is stout and strong of body, tough of flank and finely muscled. It has horns a fathom long, 1½ its muzzle thick. Lemminkainen took the great ox from the pasture, plough too from the meadow's edge. With it plowed the Sampo's roots up, fastenings of the ciphered cover. Then the Sampo started moving as the ciphered cover loosened. First of all, old Väinämöinen and Smith Ilmarinen second. Third, the wayward Lemminkainen carried off the magic Sampo out of Pohjola's stone fortress, from inside the copper mountain, and they bore it to their vessel, quickly stowed it in their ship. That's part of Runo 42. What's going on here? Well, it seems like the Kalevala heroes want that Sampo. Louhi's got it. She doesn't want to share it with them. And so they're going to take it from her, whether she likes it or not. This is seemingly an episode from history that's told from the vantage point of the victors. And Louhi is basically turned into an evil witch, when in fact Louhi was probably the symbol of the mother goddess who was inhabiting that region of the world way before the Kalevala heroes got there. So there's subtext going on here. This is just a summary of the whole Runo 42, what I just summarized. Yeah, Louhi, this mysterious character in the Kalevala, you know, she's turned into a witch because she controls the Sampo, she controls the pole star, she controls time. She's like almost like Kali, you know, the Hindu goddess Kali. She's in charge of the Axis Mundi. She's actually the representative of the old matrifocal mother goddess religion in the far north. You know, it's said by historians of religion and the Western philosophy and so on that the mother goddess survived in Crete to a very late time. You know, with all of the stuff in Crete with the mother goddess religion there, and then it fell to the rise of the patriarchal dominating religions. I always like the sort of the framework of Riane Eisler with these things, where she talks about, it's not so much like matriarchy versus patriarchy, it's like the terms that she uses is the dominator worldview versus the partnership worldview. And I really believe that there's something really amazing hidden inside of the Kalevala that we can tease out once again and restore the original story. And I was so happy to learn that you took this picture. Is that correct?
Not that one. It was the one that was on the front of the Shaman magazine.
Oh, okay. But I saw this one in Shaman's Drum magazine.
Yeah, that was in there.
Yeah, and I was so psyched to hear in your talk this afternoon that this is Tatiana.
Yes, that's Tatiana.
Oh, that's so amazing. I always loved, it's such iconic photographs of the shamanists.
She was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
So, you know, I was seized by the muse one May day in 1995 because I'd been thinking about these things and I'd been reading these things aloud to people and even recording them. And Freiberg was with me on this. He gave me permission to record these things. from his translation. But I started to see that, like, well, what is this theft of the Sampo about? And I started to realize that there's this other sort of layer going on in the story. And it has to do with how the Sampo, or soma, is something that can give access to knowledge, healing, paradise, however you want to phrase it. These are archetypal themes in all of the world's great religious traditions. And there are those who will want to storm the gates of heaven and wrest for their own benefit the keys to paradise. And there are those who will want to protect the keys to paradise from unworthy interlopers. So I basically wrote a poem called Louhi Gazes Deep, which tells the story of the theft of the Sampo from Louhi's perspective. Louhi gazes deep. Louhi waits upon the landing. She, the mistress of far Northland, stares into the churning sea waves, anticipates the fated meeting. On the horizon, there, she sees it, boat of plunder plunging shoreward, coming to her very feet. And she knows, she feels it in her, Vainamoinen with his brothers, wily wizards of Kalevala, have come to steal her precious grinder, magic mill they call the Sampo. And why should they desire the Sampo? Why pursue the magic maker? The Sampo spins upon the pole star. Ciphered cover is the star dome, brightly colored in the springtime. Among the roots of sacred tree runs the streaming juice of heaven, always ready to anoint us with its speckled velvet cover. Oven belly of the mother, in her navel a churning furnace, making more of everything. Time and space and people borning from the magic mill of Northland in the sacred copper mountain, protected from the death of Tuoni, who boils the barley to feed the darkness. No, the Sampo doesn't conceal with numbing nectar of the cornfield. Instead, it shows the many levels, realms of 3 or 5 or 9 interweaving planes of vision, or maybe 7 by the counting of the shaman who there journeys to the pole star, hinge of heaven, gullet of the spinning maelstrom, umbilicus of the swirling cauldron, stomach of old Vipunen, pillar of the ancient Sampo. And they've come to steal it, rip it out from root of tree, flip the ciphered cover sideways, stow it in their birchwood boat, and take it from this land forever, stolen from the land of Louhi, Pohjola, home of Soma. They want to drink from Louhi's fountain, bridesmaid of the forest spirit, turner of the milling stone, and drain the blood from glowing features, dry the rivers with their damning, sing the goddess into serving hungry weapons of the smithy, her golden tresses torn to pieces like the fragments of our knowing from a former age of wisdom. Louhi gazes deep. They're coming closer, and she sees the blowing beard of the great Vainamoinen steering sternly, and Lemminkainen rowing proudly. Ilmarinen fronts the crew, rowing full with bent knee forward, pushing the boat through chest-high billows, closer to the shores of Louhi, closer with each beat of heart. And she knows she will not do it, won't surrender precious star mill, will not lay down without fight, won't hand over juice of heaven to those who drink not with their hearts. Louhi gazes deep. So that's what I think is really going on in this particular chapter of the Kalevala, there's like a subtext story. There's the story that's told by the victors that gets enshrined in the mythology as it comes down to us in the Kalevala story. But clearly, there's this older context, this subtext going on, in which Lohi is sort of like the ancient mother goddess, who is sort of like the gate guardian to paradise. You know, this is one of those themes that you find in all of the world's great religions. And you even see it in Bob Dylan's song, Knock, Knock, Knocking on Heaven's Door. You know, it's one of those great teaching stories about how when we want to access the higher dimensional wisdom or higher states of consciousness, I think that there's sort of an attitude of humility or humbleness that's always required. And it's like the great story of Pandora's box or Prometheus, you know, stealing fire from the gods, and Pandora's box, where it's good to have an attitude of humility and humbleness. Otherwise, the results might not be exactly what you wanted. So, like the Kalevala heroes, they're like lusting. They're like thirsty. They're lusting for this thing called the Sampo. They don't really understand what it is, but they want it, you know. And Lohi's there to protect them from their own ignorance, in a sense, because you know, if they can storm the gates of heaven and sort of steal the elixir of paradise, but if they're doing that in a covetous way, you know, lusting for acquisition, then it sort of misses the point, you know, and reverence is required. So, well, that's pretty much it. I'm surprised I got through it all. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to just discuss some of these things. Yeah.
Traditionally, was Loki pictured as a harpy type?
Yeah, that's how she's pictured in the Kalevala. She's thought to be like the witch of North Farm, or the witch of North. But again, that's probably because that's how she was perceived from the vantage point of the people who wanted what she had and didn't understand what it was. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So the source of the Lohi part of your story, was that coming through like some of the indigenous people that was there, the Sami or the Lapland or something? So that's where that came from, and then it met with...
I think so.
Okay.
That's kind of like a historical reconstruction of what happened historically with the migrations, you know, what was going on there. I mean, it's sort of generally recognized that there is the circumpolar matrilineal, matrifocal sort of tradition going on up there for a long time. And I guess, you know, it's still,
So with the use of Amanita muscaria in Siberian shamanism, that was not really a part of the Finnish tradition, or?
Well, the Finns participated in that. I think there's an older substrate, you know, of the Finns, because the Finns were there for quite a while too, and they came from largely, I think, they came from Central Asia. I mean, the language survives to today, and you know some of it. The language is very interesting and unique, and so I think they participated in that sort of Central Asian, Siberian, circumpolar tradition that involved shamanism with Amanita. And there's a great book called Uno Harva, is the author of Finno-Ugric and Siberian mythology. It's part of that old Mythology of All Races series. Came out in 13 volumes, and it's this big, thick book, and it's got all the great, you know, the different Siberian tribes, you know, the Koryaks and how they even had a tradition of the medicine woman in the forest that you could go visit, and she had her little cookery underneath the tree, you know, and she'd ladle out, you know, the healing stuff for you if you were sick. She's like a medicine woman. And so there's a lot of that, and it's still, some part of it still survives today, I think. Yeah.
Have you been to Finland?
I have not.
So most of what you're getting is through scholarly studies and things like that.
Yeah, and you know, working with the literature.
Do you have any idea how is the Kalevala considered like common knowledge among Finnish people, or is it like just something that they've heard of, or you know what I'm saying? It's,
Oh yeah, it's well known. It's very well known, and
kids learn it in literature like maybe Shakespeare or something we do, or is it more common than that?
it's very common, and kids learn it in school. But as they grow into adulthood, sometimes it's you know set to the side. But then again, there's almost like you know, the Kalevala being published was part of a national heritage movement where the Finns could claim it as their own, and it partly was responsible for the survival of the Finnish language. A lot of the indigenous languages and the borderland languages were getting destroyed, like you know Cornish well, Brittany, yeah, the Britannic languages, and a lot of those were falling by the wayside. So it was part of that heritage movement. But today, there's a lot of young people in Finland like doing art and music, you know, using themes from the Kalevala in their music and stuff like that. So it's a way to connect with their deep heritage, and they've grown to think of it as being, you know, really cool, you know, instead of just stuff they had to read in grade school. Yeah.
Do you have any feelings about the mechanism of this mill and its grinding and its structure?
Well, there's that's an interesting question, because these symbols have different you know, versions as they turn into different stories. Like, I remember being in my grandma's house when I was a kid, and there was this you know, stories of the far north, and there's one story called Why the Sea is Salty. And that has to do with the mill spinning in the ocean, grinding out salt, and obviously that's some kind of version of this magic mill thing. It's almost like, in one level, it's supposed to be something that can produce anything you wish, so sort of like a magic box that will crank out whatever you desire or something like that. The mechanism itself, you know, I guess the basic structure is pretty simple, where you have the axis, the central pillar, and then the sort of the concave inverted dome, and then it's covered in little you know, stars. In fact, from what I remember, is one of the folklore things that sort of parallels this is that the Siberian shamans liked to find Amanita muscaria mushrooms that had 7 little speckles on it. And the reason why is because there's 7 stars in the Big Dipper constellation, which is circumpolar, and that's called the Great Bear. And the Great Bear is another, you know, huge part of the tradition. So it's all part of the mythology. But as far as the mechanism, it's a pretty simple thing. The fact that sort of the Sampo gets, you know, pulled off its peg and thrown in the boat, you know, the authors of Hamlet's Mill go into that quite a bit as a way of talking about how this ancient mythology is a metaphor for the shifting skies with the precession of the equinoxes and so on. I think of it as like a cosmological metaphor or a cosmological mechanism of some kind. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.